hope you all are signed in. I know it's been a line, but if you haven't signed in, please do so at the break or whenever you have to step out for a moment. Also, there are evaluations. Every year I see that you fill those out because that helps you plan for the next year. Things that are pertinent to you that you think you would like to see, or if you would like to see us expand on one of the subjects that will be presented today. Let's see. Housekeeping things. There's restrooms out these doors and around the corner. You can also go out those doors and down the steps, but they're right there. There are refreshments out in the hall. If you came in early and haven't seen that, they are here now. And if you have cell phones, please put them on silent. And then we'll take a break at about 10:15 or so. But if you need to get up in the meantime, just, you know, as unobtrusively as possible. Our mayor, Morse, is here. She's going to say a few comments, and then we'll start with the first presentation.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. The goal was to fill the room. The city has an educational component to what we're trying to do with regard to housing in the community, and even I feel the need to come for a refresher, so thank you for coming. Our housing stock needs all of our attention at different times. Sometimes it's pristine and perfect, and the next couple of blocks over there's a spot that isn't so perfect. So this is helpful to us to put the best face on Manhattan that we can. So I won't take any more of your time. Thank you very much.
And then we're going to start right off with Chad Bunger. He is the Assistant Director of Community Development for the city, and he's going to talk about the Unified Development Ordinance and the updates to the zoning law.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning. How is everybody? Great. Can you all hear me, or do I need to find a microphone? I'm not the quietest person, so we'll probably manage just fine. Thank you for coming. I know you're excited to hear about zoning and subdivision regulations at 8 o'clock in the morning, so thank you for that. I don't know how much you've heard. We have gotten out and about a little bit and are planning to do more about our project, the Unified Development Ordinance. We started this last year. It's an effort by the Community Development Department and other departments in the city to update our zoning regulations, our subdivision regulations, and combine them into a new document or a new set of regulations called the Unified Development Ordinance. It is not a total rewrite, but we are updating them extensively. Our last time we have cracked open the book and from page 1 to the last page looked at our zoning regulations comprehensively to update them was in 1996. That was my first year of college. Chicago Bulls won a championship. I got a Nintendo 64, which was cutting edge at that time. The Unabomber was captured. O.J. Simpson's trial was started that year, so a lot has changed since that time, and so we felt we needed to update it. Our subdivision regulations have also sat without a complete update for several years. This doesn't mean we haven't looked at certain sections or updated pieces and parts of it as needed, because we certainly have done that with a variety of sections and regulations, but this will be a full-scale review of our ordinance or ordinances. Some goals of the UDO. We really want it to be a one-stop shop for property owners, developers, business owners to figure out what they can or can't do with their property or how they can develop. So, like I said, we're taking what is today a separate book for zoning and separate book for subdivision, putting them together so you can find where everything is in under one book. We'll also be cross-referencing different regulations from other departments. So, information about streets and curb cuts and those kind of things from Public Works, and references to the building code or property maintenance code or whatever. Those sort of things. We're also going to be, also be updating development types. So today, we don't have a development standard for townhomes. Those single-family homes stacked side by side, garage in the front, we just don't have a definition for that. We call them multifamily, and that then has a bunch of other regulations. And so it has forced developers who want to build quality townhomes, or just townhomes, to go through a planned unit development process, which is timely, costly, and adds to the price of the development. So those are the kind of things we're looking to update and modernize with our code process. We also wanted to make it easier to use and understand. I don't want to make it too easy because then I'll be out of a job, but we want to make it easier. We're going to use a product called Encode Plus. Our consultant team are the ones that created this software program. And it'll have all the regulations in it. It'll be web-based. It'll cross-reference where cross-references need to be automatically. It'll have pop-up definitions, so if you don't know what the definition of townhome is, you can hover over it, it'll pop it up. It'll also have a number of tools, tables, calculators, and maps. The plan is, if I want to open a coffee shop, I can go to a calculator, type in coffee shop, and it'll tell me what zoning districts I can do that in. Tell me how much parking I need based on the plan, or the idea of how big my building I want it to be, what kind of signage, those kind of things. So hopefully it's real streamlined. That's the plan anyhow. The other big goal of ours is to limit the amount of nonconformity. Something that today conforms to all the rules and regulations, was built accordingly, and then we change something and it becomes illegal, so to speak, a non-conforming use or structure. We're really working hard to prevent that. One of Eric's Cattell's favorite saying is, redoing zoning regulations is like tugging on a string in a sweater, just all comes apart. We're trying to put knots on a lot of that stuff so our sweater doesn't fall apart, and we cause a lot of headaches and heartaches for property owners and business owners. And I think we're being real successful on that. So our project team, Kendick Keys Collaborative is the lead agency, lead consultant that we are working with. They're out of Texas. They specialize in code development, regulations, those kind of things. And so they're organizing it for us, doing most of the work. White Smith is a law firm out of Kansas City, Missouri. And they're helping with some legal aspects, because there are a lot of legal elements to this, especially in the sign code. We're taking a look at our sign regulations. There have been some Supreme Court decisions recently that we need to do a few tweaks. So they're helping with that. The GP is Gateway Planning. They're a design firm that's helping with our Iveyville design standards and some other design elements of the regulations. And then the last one, Confluence. They're a regional multifaceted company that are helping with the parking standards, landscaping, and some other design things. So these four groups are working with City Hall. We have a group called the Technical Advisory Team that is made up of anybody that touches a development in one way or another, and some other outside agencies locally, like the the Flint Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, and the Police Department. They're helping us draft and review certain pieces of the document. And then we also have a citizen group called the Ordinance Advisory Committee, made up of citizens, business owners, developers, consultants from Manhattan to help also give direction to this project. So that's the team or the process. The consultants are doing this in 3 modules. We've got bunches of pages of our current regulations, and so we're putting together, that means we have bunches of pages of regulations, and so we're breaking it down into 3 modules. The first one's really the heart and soul. It has all the boring information about establishing the UDO, all the preambles and all that junk. That's in there. We're also reorganizing the zoning districts. One of the things that we heard over and over is we have too many zoning districts, especially residential. I think we have something like 8 residential districts. And the reality is, there isn't a whole lot of difference between an R single-family residential district and an R1 single-family residential district, except for 15 or 2,500 square feet of lot area is required. So we heard over and over that you probably have we have too many, and it doesn't do us a whole lot if you're looking at trying to streamline things. And so what we have, we've reorganized stuff. So on the right-hand side, as you're looking at it, is our current regulations, all 8 residential, 5, 6 commercial. We're breaking it down on the left-hand, what's proposed, to 5 new residential districts that combine some. The commercial is really one-to-one. There are a few areas that we're combining with the hope that it streamlines things, with the hope that it's less confusing, and we just don't have silly little confusions with it. And then industrial, again, fairly similar. I should back up. I want to make this one point. We are adding a mixed-use development or mixed-use zoning district. Today, if you wanted to create a really cool zoning district that you may see, or a really cool development that you may have seen in other parts of the world, parts of America, whatever, that has storefronts and apartments and houses all within the same development, you couldn't do that real smoothly and easily under our current regulations. You'd have to go through plan unit development, which is timely, costly, and adds to the cost of development. So what we're doing is creating our own district that has all those rules, all those standards built in an effort to streamline it, so that you know going in, or as neighbors, your neighbor wants to do a mixed-use development, you know what is going to be there, what it's going to look like, generally speaking. So we'll have parking standards, landscape standards, signage, what uses can interact and not interact, and how that mixed-use development will be screened and buffered from the neighboring developments, whatever they are. And then industrial. There has been talk of eliminating PUDs, plan unit developments. Plan unit developments are customized zoning district. I've mentioned it a couple times, probably just realize that most of you don't know or care to know what that is. Plan unit development is a customized zoning district just for that site. So we talk about the use, what the buildings look like, what the parking, landscape, sign, all that stuff for that site. We'll still have those for very unique things, but today we do a lot of them, and I sure would like to get away from doing a lot of them just because, as I said, they're timely and costly and yada yada. So we're going to try to get away with that, but still have the standards there that the neighbors and the community can be assured that it'll be a high quality development. So those are the rest of the other ones, some special districts and floating districts, that kind of stuff. We also are proposing some new residential development types, so just residential. Standard clustered master plan. Standard is what you would see today, especially in anywhere east of Setchild. So fairly standard development. Cluster development is a design of a residential subdivision where we take into consideration the landscape. So ravines, hillsides, natural areas, open space, those kind of things. If a developer will work with the city to preserve those things, those important environmental factors, we will give them some incentives to make the developments closer together, reduce impact on the environment. So maybe in a standard development they could get, I'm making up numbers here, so don't quote me exactly, but let's say you can get 10 lots on an acre. But if you work with the city to preserve some of those natural functions of the site, we'll give you 13 or 14 lots per acre. Again, I'm making numbers up, that isn't exact, but you get the idea that we give some incentive to preserve that stuff. Then the other one is the master plan development. So instead of rezoning each little site within a large block or large development and having to go through a variety of bureaucratic processes to make that happen, We'll streamline it. You present the whole package to the neighborhood, the whole package to the planning board and the city commission, and it would be an intermix. It could be an intermix of different housing types. So you could put in one area of your 80-acre site single-family homes, and in another area duplexes, and over here apartments, and even some limited commercial, all within the same 80-acre site. We would define which areas go where, how it looks, through some other regulations. But all the idea that we get a good development through the process. Neighborhood knows what's going on, so they're protected, and the community knows we get a good, high-quality development, but we're not going through a bunch of just bureaucracy for bureaucracy's sake, is the idea. Moving on. The established neighborhood overlay, so the older part of town, the single-family, two-family, and four-family areas as of today, is getting somewhat of a facelift. We've enacted that overlay district to protect the older housing stock or preserve the character of that area in 2003, and has really worked pretty well. But there are some things that we're proposing to kind of give it a few tweaks to make it even better. This one, I believe we're going to shelve following some conversations with Planning Board and City Commission. We were proposing or had proposed accessory dwelling units across the city where you could, a homeowner, a property owner that lives at the site, could put a small apartment, 800 square feet, in their house or above a garage or whatnot to help with paying for the mortgage, those kind of things. I don't think City of Manhattan maybe necessarily is ready for that kind of development type, and so we are going to put that aside and save it for another day and discuss it another time. We're also talking of creating or the ability for tiny home villages. So we all know the tiny home not craze, that's the wrong word to use, the movement about having smaller living for some folks, less costly home, less impact on the environment, those sort of things. We want to embrace that. We've had some inquiries about doing it. Truthfully, today, if you built a small home on a foundation stick built to the city's building code, you could put it on any single-family zoning lot in town. Maybe your covenant wouldn't allow it. But if you're going to build a $40,000 home and put it on a $15,000 or $20,000 lot, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Especially when that lot is maybe 20,000 acre, a large lot. So what we're envisioning here with these villages is smaller land devoted to those homes, kind of like a manufactured home park, in that it's a community amongst themselves. They have internal roads. Everyone has a small chunk of land. 1,200 square feet would be the lot size, generally speaking, for these small 400 square foot homes. So we're providing that housing type in the UDO proposal. So this is still a work in progress. Again, we've drafted it, we've looked at it, staff has looked at it a bunch, and it's being edited and revised, and we're still working on it, but we're making good progress. Module 2 are the nuts and bolts, I like to say, and I know you're getting bored, so I'll rip through this pretty quick, but we got the subdivision regulations in there, so easements and setbacks, or easements and access, where you can put your curb cuts or your intersections, talking about sidewalks and trail connectivity through that. This is the part where we have floodplain regulations. There's really no changes in that. We're working hard to making sure that our flood-prone areas are protected as best we can. So we didn't need a whole lot of change in that. And our sign regulations are getting a mild tweak, as I mentioned. And then we're also addressing new parking standards. We are in the middle of reviewing this, and we are contemplating reducing a lot of our minimum parking standards, especially in commercial areas where maybe our minimums don't really jive with what someone really needs to park. for their coffee shop or their hair salon or whatever commercial businesses is. So we're taking a relook at that to make sure that we're not burdening a business owner with putting in a $2,500 parking space where they don't really need it. We're also looking at different ways to combine parking areas with different uses, giving some credits if you're going to do some different things in terms of transit, those sort of things. So we're looking at that as well as bicycle parking. And then landscape requirements. Today our zoning regulations have some pretty minimal landscape requirements. What we're doing here, we're not wanting to make an oasis out of Manhattan, although that would be lovely. We're really just creating a set of regulations that bring the parking requirement up to what most commercial developments are already putting in. So we're not exceeding it, we're not asking for palm trees and lush gardens, really just the parking lot plantings and foundation planning requirements that new businesses are already putting in to ensure that Manhattan stays attractive. Again, this is a work in progress. The last section are the how-tos, so all the procedural stuff on how we're going to go through rezonings, subdivisions, Board of Zoning Appeals efforts. We're also going to be addressing non-conforming uses. I see a lot of property managers and landlords of rental properties here. We recognize the unique character of Manhattan in terms of the rental environment. And so city staff has taken this bull by the horns and are proposing a format to address nonconformities for residential uses. So if you have a 4-family dwelling in a single-family neighborhood now, today, currently, that's nonconforming, we're proposing a framework. We haven't written the regulations, but more of a framework on how to address that, how to verify that use, how to give a zoning verification so that property can remain and even be rebuilt, but then also how to address some of those illegal uses that shouldn't have ever been there, somehow got there, and the neighborhood are concerned about. So we're trying to balance that. The planning board took a look at that this week, and the city commission will be taking a look at our framework on May 7th, I believe, during a work session. So if you're interested in that, I would really invite you to attend and give us your opinions on it. And then short-term rentals, as you see. This is to be drafted. We have not gotten this section yet. We're still working on it. And I expect it to be out in a couple of weeks. City staff will take some time to review it and then do some tweaks, edits, and then put it out to the community for review. So I've bored you enough on this stuff, but I do invite you to look at the information. We have a website devoted to the project, City of MHK /UDO, where you can find the draft, some more information. There's some maps there to see how the zoning changes would affect your properties in terms of what it is today, what it would be tomorrow. And then we have started a blog. That's the bottom link. How do you do? So play on words there. And it has allowed the community development staff a little bit more creativity in explaining our new UDO, elements of our new UDO. So it's not just the boring regulations that no one can really, put you to sleep. We've allowed our staff to speak a little bit more creatively for those things like ADUs, bike parking, tiny homes, those sort of things. So I hope you check that out, and we'll be putting more stuff up on there as we get more elements. So there's my contact information. If you have any questions, take them now, or you can email me, call me, whatever. Really would like to hear from you, because this is completely 100% should be your community regulations, not just community development regulations. So yes, Gary.
Sir, for the few properties that are in town that have more than 4 bedrooms, will this UDO address the ability of a property owner to utilize additional bedrooms beyond 4 that are actually part of the structure when it was originally built way back whenever. And then I have another question.
Yep. We have not taken on that topic of changing what the definition of our family is. That's where that 4 unrelated people in a house. So if you have 4 renters that aren't related, and you have a 6-bedroom unit, then today's regulations, if we haven't tackled it, we haven't been directed to tackle it, to change that to allow you to use 6 bedrooms or whatnot. So no, we have not.
Is that the framework in which it can be addressed, or is that totally different?
We need some direction. Professionally, I haven't been convinced we need to do that, to change that. There are some reasons for overcrowdedness and safety and those side of things that I'm convinced the 4 is a decent number. So if you'd like to see it changed, I would encourage you to talk to city management or city commission to look at changing that number.
Well, there certainly aren't a lot of them, and you're certainly not going to allow them to be built. They end up that way because the home becomes a rental.
Yep.
My second question is, you've done a good job of reviewing the intended consequences of these revisions or the creation of the UDO, but you haven't mentioned what the unintended consequences are. What's going to happen from a negative side with these changes?
Do you have anything in particular?
No, I'm not a planning person,
Okay.
so I don't know, but I do know from life's experience that most of the time we have a tendency to paint things in a very beautiful way, and then, uh-oh.
Yeah, you're right on there that there are a number of potential unintended consequences. We got our first look at Modular 1, Eric, what? May, June, July of last year, maybe even earlier than that. And we spent probably 6 to 8 months of just staff time combing through it, figuring out if this happens here, what does that mean, and here. So I'd be a fool to say we've made 100% ironclad, no unintended consequences, but we have worked extremely hard to limit those. By and large, nothing has changed with districts. So if you are in an R1 today and it has these set lot areas and setbacks, nothing's really changing with the new zoning regulations. Any changes or tweaks have been really just to landscape requirements for commercial and those kind of things, parking. We do understand parking is a concern for a lot of folks. But these are just minimums. So we're working really hard, and that's why I would invite you to check out the regulations. Love to meet with you and talk through them, because we don't want unintended consequences. We want to get this as right as we can for the community. And so it's going to take the community to look at this and make sure we have it right. So, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Chad. Melody Sexton, Manhattan Area Habitat for Humanity.
Thanks.
And I might have missed, I really like what I'm seeing so far, but I might have missed a timeline for completion.
Oh, I didn't mention that, yeah. I did not mention that, I'm sorry.
That's
So the plan is, we hope to have it completed this spring, June-ish, and then finish revisions and get it through the beginning of the adoption process, August, September. Maybe that's a little aggressive, I don't know, we'll see, but that's the timeline, is we'll have it hopefully buttoned up September, October. We'll see how it goes. So
Thank you.
that's the idea. Yes, ma'am.
I live in one of those R1s that's got an overlay. So if you bulk that into general, how many families is general? Your RS and R1 and general were clustered into your new back one.
So you're in the R1, so that would be low density. So,
And an overlay.
and then what overlay, do you know?
I'm on Humboldt. 1504 home.
So that'd be the established neighborhood, the TNO. So really, R1 stays single family. Nothing really changes. The R2, it's being bundled because really R2 is a low density, two-family development. A duplex is considered a low density use in our comprehensive plan and other elements. But we've devised a mechanism where existing two-family R2 areas can only remain R2, and anywhere you couldn't expand that R2 into other areas.
Into an R1.
Right. You wouldn't be able to blossom out. So we've devised a mechanism. We'll designate the existing R2 as its own designation on a map, so it locks it in. You know, I could, if you live there, you know I could build a two-family, or a two-family could be next to me. But we've also built in protections that says that that duplex isn't going to bleed out beyond that
So
area.
that's all clustered under RL though, but those separate things will still exist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So for new developments in this, new developments, if I want to build duplexes in my 100-acre subdivision, the only way I could go through a duplex or to create duplexes would be in master plan development. That would say, here are my duplex areas. Everything else would be single family or whatever.
Got it. Thank you.
Roger, you had a question?
I got 3 items.
All right.
I'm addressing them to you, but I really want the commissioner to hear it.
Okay, very good.
Airbnbs.
Yeah.
You can have those generally anywhere right now in any residential district. When you put the regulations that aren't written into form, you may limit those Airbnb locations. What happens with the Airbnbs that are currently legal, that are established? Will they be grandfathered, or will they have to be eliminated?
Truthfully, we haven't gotten into there. We know we want to address them. The commissioners have asked us to address them. But truthfully, we haven't gotten into it to know exactly what that means.
Okay. Monday night, we had a meeting, area urban planning board.
Yep.
And they rezoned or recommended for rezoning a tract of land east of the university.
Mm-hmm.
There are, in that new regulation, there's a 15,000 square foot requirement for any new construction.
So Roger, could I appreciate, well, I don't know where you're going with this,
I
but
want the
considering,
I want the commissioner to hear this, but
I get that, but we also, so I don't mean to be rude, I just want to embrace the public hearing process that it's going into.
Mm-hmm.
So I fully appreciate you wanting to comment on it, but we have a process where I'd really rather you speak at the city commission on the urban core rezoning rather than this forum, just to protect the commissioner and the public hearing process, okay?
The third one I've got, and we talked about this Monday night also, where the city had downzoned certain areas of town,
Mm-hmm.
and you've now created properties that are non-conforming. In the case, I've got a triplex that was built as a triplex before Manhattan ever had zoning.
You bet.
Now I'm an R1 district.
Yep.
When you redo and give us the ability to come back to legal conforming, or legal non-conforming, excuse
Right.
me, are you in fact not spot zoning then?
No, all we're doing is cleaning that up. So the nonconformities, I could go for another 4 hours because it is a complicated thing. I'd encourage you to show up to the city commission to hear more about it. But really, we're just trying to find a way to give the properties that were built legally, lawfully, and have maintained the right to stay, and even under today's regulations, the right to rebuild if damaged. And if something happens to those illegal ones, we're going to change it so that through attrition, we know that those illegal uses either get enforced or go away over time. So that's coming up on May 7th. I really appreciate if you're interested in that, attending it. I think I ran over time, so I know Brad has a good presentation as well. So thank you very much. Sorry.
Fine, you're good. I can fit mine then.
Very much. So Brad is up next, Brad Claussen, going to talk about zoning. I'm just going to add a little comment. If any of you want to be contacted specifically about the UDO process, or if you would, we have an extra sheet there that's blank. We'll put your name on it and contact you. Okay? All right. Brad's going to take a minute. Are you ready?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Brad Claussen. I'm the building official for the city of Manhattan. I think many of you, so thanks for putting up with me for an hour this morning. I'm going to actually do something kind of similar to what I've done before, but it's a little bit different, and it's called Come Along on an Inspection. So, you know, people always wonder, when we go out, we get called out to do an inspection on a house or an apartment or whatever it may be. You know, what are we all looking at when we're actually on that inspection? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to kind of go through a typical inspection here and look at some of the things that we would normally look at. I did not print this slideshow, but on our table in the back, right behind you back here, are all kinds of handouts that have most of this info on them. So if you're interested in anything that's in here, check the table for handouts. There's a book called Check Your Home, which I know many of you have probably seen before. It's a really good kind of handy guide to go through a house or an apartment and check it for code compliance. There's some other things back there. So if you don't see something though as a handout and you think it would be helpful to you, let me know. We're always creating new things that we put on our website and try to get out to the public for information. So the other thing before I get started, please ask questions as we go, okay? I'll try to have some time after we're done for questions as well, but if you see something and you're not clear on it or have a question, let me know. This works a lot better if you're interactive, okay? So since I've known a lot of you for a lot of years, I know you're all interactive people, so just cut in whenever you need to. Okay, so before we get started with the inspection, on our way to do this, there's a couple of things. We're going to be talking about an existing residential structure. You know, we also, our property maintenance code, which is the second bullet there, we're going to be using the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code to do this inspection. That's the adopted existing structures code here in the city of Manhattan. This code actually applies not just to residential, but to all existing structures. So there are things in here for commercial buildings that are existing. So I think there's a misconception sometimes this is just a residential code, but keep in mind we can also look at commercial structures using this book as well. But specific to this presentation, we're going to be talking about a residential structure, okay? And if you have any questions, please ask. Well, you know what, I don't always know the answer, but if I don't, I'll make sure I find out and get you the answer when I can. Okay, so we pulled up to our house here. Okay. I've obviously over-exaggerated this quite a bit. If we ran into a structure like this, we'd be undertaking a different process, okay? We have a process whereby we can eventually demolish a structure that's in clearly hazardous condition. So this is not what we're likely to see when we pull up to a house. Something like this is more likely, you know, average residential structure that we might, if we get called to an inspection. So when we first pull up, we're gonna, you know, after we talk to the tenant and get permission to do the inspection and so on, we're gonna generally look around the outside of the structure, okay? Some of the things on the outside that we're gonna be looking for, first thing is that the address is posted on the structure, okay? And let's go back here. Anybody see an address that's visible on from the street on that? You know, maybe it's back up here, tucked up under the door somewhere, but the code actually says it needs to be plainly visible from the street. You know, there are those folks that are curious. That sounds kind of nitpicky that we require an address on the structure, and that's a code requirement, but I will tell you, when you need emergency services, fire, police, ambulance, if they have to waste even a minute or two trying to find the right building because there's no addresses on them, that's precious time that they're losing. So it's not expensive, it's an easy, cheap thing to do. So what I'd probably do if it were me, great place would be to put some black numbers right here on this white post maybe. Yeah.
I notice a lot of people have the street numbers on the curb as well.
Good question. We actually, which is fine, you can do that, but we don't actually allow that to substitute for the address on the structure.
Okay.
The reason that is because if you have snow on the ground or a car happens to park in front of it, it's obscured. And we do have some houses, generally they might be bigger houses set further back from the curb that would be hard to see on the house. You know, a lot of, there's some really nice ornate mailboxes around town that have the stone addresses, which is fine. As long as you can see it from the curb or from the public way, that's good. But the painted ones on the curb, feel free to do it, but it won't substitute for that.
Okay.
So.
Brad, one real quick, I
Yeah.
had a fire inspection recently, your fire inspectors in the
Mhm.
room. If that was a duplex or multifamily,
Mhm.
the requirement is also to have the number or the letter of the apartment.
Right, but now that doesn't really need to be visible there's nothing in the code that says that apartment number has to be visible from the street, so.
But it needs to be visible from the outside. for the
Well,
fire
you need to
department.
be, so that they can find it. I mean, so if somebody calls in, 1101 Points, apartment 2, they need to be able to, when they get there, the address 1101 is gonna be on the structure, so they know they're at the right structure. Then after that, they're gonna wind up needing to make sure that the number of the apartment is plainly visible on the exterior door for that apartment, so. Okay? So a couple other exterior things that we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at exterior electrical wiring. I'll show you a picture in a minute of what I'm talking about with that. Just any damage to that wiring on the outside that might cause fire or electrical issues. Chimneys, fuel burning appliance vents, so if you've got metal appliance vents coming out the roof, masonry chimneys, we want to make sure those are in good condition. We want to make sure that they're extended above the adjacent roof line. If you put a wood burning stove in your basement and you extend the chimney up the side of the house but you don't get it high enough, you can actually get wind that blows back down that and cause that to not draft properly. So siding, exterior walls, that's pretty self-explanatory. Here's the wiring I was talking about. So this is actually attached to the outside of a building. There is electrical wiring that is actually sunlight resistant. It's actually stamped right on the sheathing, SR, okay, sunlight resistant. This obviously wasn't, because that piece of wiring right there has had the outer sheathing eaten completely off of it. Actually, I wish I'd have brought it, and I didn't. I have a piece of wiring that an electrician gave me some years ago that he took off of a house. And the one side is pristine. It looks like it was new, which is the side that was up against the wall. The other side is gone. I mean, it's literally nothing left of it. So if you have wiring on the outside, it needs to be sunlight resistant wiring, or else eventually something like that's going to happen. The other thing is that people paint over wiring and things like that. Sometimes the chemicals in paints and cleaners can actually do the same thing. Some more outside stuff. We're going to look at the doors, windows, condition of those. If I go back to that picture right there, you see up there we've got somebody that's just plywooded over either a door or a window opening up top up here. We're going to look at the porches, the condition of the porches and decks here. Handrails, guardrails. We see this one's got a handrail on this side. Just a question, we'll see who can answer. How many stairs do I need right there before I'm required to have a handrail on there? One more time? 5. Yeah, it's more than 4 risers is what the code says. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 risers on this one, so we're required to have a handrail on that stair. So once you exceed 4. In new construction, it's actually at 4. It's 1 less on a new house. But the other thing that we see here, we've got guardrails around this porch, but because we've got 6 risers, let's say those risers are 6 inches apiece, we've got 36 inches from here up to there. Once you hit 30 inches, you need a guardrail. So this open side of this stair right here probably needs some protection too. So, questions on any of that? Okay. insect screens, that's another thing from certain times of the year. The foundation. We're going to know more about that when we get inside the structure, okay? That the foundation is something we can still, you know, gain some knowledge of what that condition is by looking around the outside. Again, I'll have a picture here in a second to show you that. Roofs, drains, and gutters. You know, if you keep your gutters clean and your downspouts cleared and you grade your yard to drain, you can solve a lot of water issues in a house. It can be as simple as that. Maybe not. There may be some other water issues that you can't solve with that, but I'll guarantee you if you keep those things accomplished, you keep your gutters clean and your yard graded to drain away from the structure, you can sure save yourself a lot of expense later with foundation problems on a house, okay? Accessory structures, those would be things like detached garages and tool sheds and even fences. If we see a fence that's leaning over or laying on the ground, we're going to address that. So that all needs to be kept in good repair. Here's a couple of pictures. This top one is the one I talked to you about. You see right here on the foundation, this is actually a stone foundation originally, and somebody's tried to repair it using some concrete block at one time or another. But you can see that block in here is already starting to bulge out, and in fact, it's actually taking the wall with it. It's kind of hard to see in the shadow, but there's an actual arc in that wood frame wall that's actually being pulled out by that foundation right there. This one is pretty self-explanatory, okay? If we come up to a house and we're outside and we're looking around the exterior, how long do you suppose it's been since somebody cleaned that gutter? How long did it take that tree to grow that big right there, okay? And their drainage is going to be non-existent in that case. So that's not uncommon, believe it or not, to see gutters that look, and this is probably an extreme example. That took quite a lot to grow. It's usually we see weeds and that kind of thing that are coming out of those gutters. So keep them clean. I mean, if you go up there a couple of times a year and just make sure they're cleaned out, that should be sufficient to drain. All right, so now we're done around the outside. So let's get inside the house here now. Okay, we're going to look at some, the interior surfaces, so the walls, the floors, the ceilings, and that kind of thing. And mold, that's always a big thing, and nowadays mold